Hey, it's Barry from Barry Online. Billy Graham is likely the most respected and influential person in our lifetime. And yet, hearing of Mr. Graham's death, Teen Vogue columnist Lauren Duca tweeted, quote, "The big news today is that Billy Graham was still alive this whole time. Anyway, have fun in hell, bitch," end quote. Duca, shortly after, tweeted again, quote, "Respecting the dead only applies to people who weren't evil pieces of shit while they were living," end quote. Has the reviewer of thigh-high boots who writes for a publication that promotes anal sex for teens gone too far? It's all about influence. And poor Lauren Duca is an influencer for sure. She's got over 400,000 followers on Twitter, not to mention her platform at Teen Vogue and appearances with Tucker Carlson on Fox News, as well as 6 appearances on MSNBC and CNN. That's a lot of influence for a gal who just celebrated her 27th birthday. Why would she trash the person and legacy of Billy Graham? Well, from my limited research, she's of the far left persuasion who particularly didn't approve of the Billy Graham organization angering the LGBT community for historically disapproving of homosexuality with inferences that included asking if God judges people with AIDS. The Billy Graham Evangelistic Association has been accused of homophobia and anti-LGBTQ initiatives, or of just following their interpretation of scriptures. I'm all for Duca having an opinion, and for boldly and rampantly sharing that opinion, but this is Teen Vogue. It's Vogue. It's about fashion primarily, but that's where Duca brilliantly capitalized on the 2016 negative comment made by Tucker Carlson that she should stick with thigh-high boot reviews. So she titled her magazine approach, Thigh-High Politics. That's brilliant. Regardless of her viewpoint or obvious political stance, or hatred of the right and Donald Trump, to diss Billy Graham? Every president since World War II has met with Billy, starting with chatting and praying with Harry Truman in 1950, Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan, Bush, Clinton, Bush again, Obama, and even Graham hung out with Donald Trump, who was at the evangelist's 95th birthday party on November 7, 2013, watching a showing of the cross. Not to mention that Graham has spoken live to 215 million people in more than 185 countries and territories, more than anyone in history. And that doesn't count reaching hundreds of millions more through television, video, film, and webcasts. It's quite extraordinary. With all that positive influence, you just can't help but gather haters along the way. But regardless of the many haters out there, Billy Graham has a legacy, and an important one at that, influencing people toward the cross of Calvary, toward a relationship with Christ, toward a desegregated society, and toward an inclusive and accepting world. This Friday, March 2nd, Billy Graham's private funeral with 2,300 invited guests will be held in Charlotte, North Carolina. Following the service, Mr. Graham will be buried beside his late wife, Ruth, whose grave is at the foot of the cross-shaped brick walkway in the library's prayer garden. President Trump plans to be there. The public can watch a live stream beginning at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, with the service scheduled to begin at noon Eastern Time. I would expect millions to be watching. That's a legacy, folks. And I'm proud to have lived during his legacy-forming life. What an example. But there's one more guy I want to highlight today, and that's Jordan Bohannon. Most of you probably don't know Jordan, and that's okay. He's a starting point guard for the Iowa Hawkeyes basketball team. As a sophomore, on February 25th, Bohannon purposely missed a free throw during their win against Northwestern, even though the team was trying to protect a late lead. Up 73-65 with about 2 minutes to go, he botched a free throw on purpose after hitting 34 free throws in a row. If he'd hit that free throw, it would have been a school record. So why did he throw the record away intentionally? Because of legacy. Chris Street is the legacy and reason Jordan Bohannon intentionally missed that free throw. As a freshman, Chris Street played 28 games and averaged 5 points and 5 rebounds. As a sophomore, Street averaged 10 points and 8 rebounds. In the first 15 games of the 1992-93 season, he averaged 14 points and 9 rebounds. But on January 19, 1993, following a team dinner, Street was killed when his car collided with a snowplow. In his final game before that tragic accident, he hit his 33rd and 34th consecutive free throw in a 65-56 loss to Duke. That set an Iowa school record, 34 free throws in a row. So here it is, 15 years later, and Jordan Bohannon has a chance to break the school record. They're up by just 8 points with 2 minutes to go, and Bohannon intentionally misses. A moment later, Bohannon pointed to the sky in an apparent tribute to Chris Street. In an interview after the game, Bohannon said, quote, "That's not my record to have. That record deserves to stay in his name," end quote. But why? Well, Bohannon, who finished Sunday's game with 25 points, said he's gotten to know the Street family over the last couple of years. He heard the story and the quality of person Street was. Iowa's basketball coach Tom Davis said, quote, "Chris represented all that is good about the Midwest and the state of Iowa. He was open, caring, honest, loving, and lived life to the fullest every day," end quote. Chris Street's number 40 was retired by the University of Iowa in February of '93. At the end of each season, the Chris Street Award is given to the Hawkeye player or players who best exemplify the spirit, enthusiasm, and intensity of Chris Street. Iowa coach Tom Davis said, quote, "We want to remember everything Chris represented. He was one of the greatest Hawkeyes of all time," end quote. Street's parents attended the February 25th game and embraced Bohannon afterwards. Street's parents told reporters, quote, "Christopher would want him to do to the best he could and stay after it. But that was Jordan's decision. And if that's what he wanted to do, then we appreciate it. We certainly in the future want him to get another shot at it," end quote. The parents were also quoted saying, "I told him next time you need to go right on by." Bohannon said after the game, "It's been in my mind for a while. I knew I wanted to leave it short a little bit. I didn't want to make it too obvious," end quote. You're a class act, Jared Bohannon, and you're only a sophomore. Hats off to you, my friend, in honoring the legacy of Chris Street. I'm sure Street wasn't perfect, and I'm sure if we dug deep enough, we'd find some dirt on Street. But who would do that? Street was reportedly a good man, and his legacy lives on. Only a hater would override such a legacy. Billy Graham is a good man, with an incredible legacy as well. I don't pretend to compare the two lives here, but I would like to compare the two responses of those deaths. One response is from a columnist for Teen Vogue who thrives on filthy language and immensely controversial pieces that instigate division, negativity, and unwholesome stances, trashing such an obvious legacy-filled life like Billy Graham, not just disagreeing, but disrespecting. The other response is from a sophomore point guard from Iowa who had the chance at such a young age to break a school record and put his name alone at the top of the leaderboard. But his platform was all about respecting a legacy, to the point of his own sacrificial action and throwing away a chance at fame, albeit small fame. The results? Both got elevated. Both got views and comments and likes and fame. Both got criticism and props. I just watched Scott Van Pelt Monday night on SportsCenter, and he highlighted this unselfish act by Bohannon, along with Sports Illustrated and numerous other outlets. I'm glad I lived in Bohannon's lifetime as well as Graham. Although vastly different in purpose and influence, it's all about legacy, living it and honoring it. Are you living a life of legacy? I know I've failed a lot myself, but generally I'm thinking more and more about it, and I'm loosely trying to organize my intentions to live a life of legacy. The light bulb has gone on the past couple of years, and I've realized my main legacy is to love my family, to be a stand-up husband, and disciple my kids. I've failed at both, but I am working on both. It's not easy, but no one ever said that living a life of legacy is easy. But it is worth it, and it's never a bad thing to honor others' legacy as well. Lauren Duca is leaving a legacy, and that's her prerogative. God bless her, but that's not a legacy I would choose to leave. Billy Graham is not resting in peace. He's partying down with Jesus. He's likely sitting very close to the head at Jesus' dinner table, not just because he was all that, but because he served and loved like Jesus. I suppose we should do the same. To Billy Graham's family, thank you for your part in Billy Graham's legacy, and may it continue, and may we follow his example. And I hope you can find some grace to have your opinion. Speak up and be bold, but don't be a jerk. There's always two sides to a story. Until you know all the facts, which you likely never will, you can't hurt people because of your passions. In love, in faith, and in leaving a legacy. Until next time, God bless. Barry Online is a new podcast giving some insight and perspective on how to respond and react to what's trending in social media, Hollywood, and even your neighbors. Subscribe today to get your weekly insight.